You chewed a piece of gum today. Maybe you're chewing one right now. It cost you almost nothing, and you'll forget it existed within the hour. But 200,000 years ago, a lump of gum, exactly like the one in your mouth, was one of the most valuable things a human being could own. It wasn't a treat, it was a tool. The kind of tool you could kill with, the kind you could starve without. It's older than farming. It's older than almost every word you know. It is, in fact, older than your species. So why did ancient humans start chewing gum? Not for fresh breath, not for fun, not to get through a boring afternoon. They chewed it to stay alive. And hidden inside that one black lump of chewed tar is a hunting weapon, a medicine chest, and a time machine all at once. But to understand any of it, you have to start with the single most dangerous problem your ancestors ever faced. So here's the problem. You're a human being 200,000 years ago, and you are hungry. In front of you stands a deer, maybe a wild horse, maybe something with tusks that can open you from hip to shoulder. That animal is faster than you, stronger than you, and it does not want to die. So how do you kill it without dying yourself? For most of human history, the honest answer was ugly. You got close, and you hoped. You ran it down, you cornered it, and you stabbed it with a sharpened stick while it kicked and gored and fought for its life, inches from your face. Hunting wasn't an adventure. It was the most dangerous thing a person did all year. And it was the line between eating and starving. And then somebody solved it. Somebody worked out how to fix a sharp stone edge onto the end of a long stick and lock it there so hard it wouldn't fly off when you threw it. The instant you can do that, everything changes. You don't have to wrestle the thing that can kill you anymore. You can strike it from 10 feet away and never let it touch you. That single invention, a stone point married to a wooden shaft, is arguably the most important weapon in the whole human story. And the only thing holding that stone onto that stick through the shock of the throw and the thrashing of a dying animal was gum. So let's talk about the gum. Long before anyone ever chewed it, it was glue. The stuff has a name, birch pitch, sometimes birch tar, and you make it by taking the bark of a birch tree and heating it, hot and starved of air, until it sweats out a thick, black, sticky goo. Let that goo cool, and it sets into a hard, shiny, black solid. And it is sticky in a way that nothing else in their entire world was sticky. So stop and picture what these people did not have. No rope that really held under strain. No nails, no screws, no tape, no glue in a tube. If you wanted to join two things together and trust them with your life, you had almost nothing. And then someone discovered that if you cook birch bark in exactly the right way, you get the strongest glue on the planet. And it stays the strongest for the next 100,000 years. That's the real headline. The first chewing gum was the first superglue. And the oldest scrap of it we've ever found rewrites who gets the credit for inventing it. Go back to 2006, to a clay quarry in central Italy called Campitello. Archaeologists there pulled two small stone flakes out of the ground, and clinging to one of them was a smear of black birch pitch, still holding the shape of the wooden handle it had once been glued to. That tool is roughly 200,000 years old. It is the oldest glued object ever found anywhere on Earth, and the hand that made it wasn't one of ours. Homo sapiens hadn't even arrived in Europe yet. It was a Neanderthal, crouched over a fire, cooking tar and gluing a blade of sharp flint onto a shaft of wood. So the first real glue on Earth wasn't invented by us. It was invented by the cousins we like to picture as dumb brutes. And they weren't just sticking things together to be tidy. They were solving the deadliest problem of their lives. Because a spear is just a stick until something holds the point on. So here's the question this whole thing turns on. If birch pitch was glue, why on earth did anyone put it in their mouth? Picture one of them. We'll call him Flint. He's young, lean, crouched beside a fire with one job to finish before the light dies. Laid out in front of him is a straight wooden shaft, a freshly chipped stone point with an edge that can open a deer, and a hard black nugget of birch pitch that's gone cold and stiff and completely useless. Because cold pitch does nothing. It won't bend, it won't stick, press it, and it just cracks. To turn it back into glue, he has to make it soft and warm and tacky again. And he's got no oven, no pot of boiling water he can spare. What he does have is the warmest, wettest, most reliable little heater he owns, his own mouth. So he drops the lump between his teeth and he chews. And that is the answer this whole story has been building toward. The very first reason a human being ever chewed gum wasn't boredom, it was manufacturing. He's chewing to melt the glue that holds his weapon together. And we're not guessing about this. We know it because of the teeth. When you dig these ancient lumps of birch pitch out of the ground, a huge number of them are stamped with bite marks, deep, sharp impressions of human molars, pressed in while the tar was still warm and soft. They chewed it into a paste, packed it hot around the base of the stone point, and bound the joint tight to the shaft. Let it cool and harden, and that joint is waterproof, rot-proof, and strong enough to punch through hide and drive into muscle. Flint's spear is only a spear because of what's in his mouth. And it was never just the one big spear. At a site in Germany called Inden-Altdorf, birch pitch turns up smeared on small, delicate points, the tips of arrows and light throwing weapons. So it wasn't a single tool. It was the whole hunting kit. Every sharp thing they threw or shot or stabbed with was held together by chewed tar. And here's where it gets even more useful. A spear breaks on the hunt. The point works loose halfway through the day, miles from camp, with a wounded animal pulling away from you into the trees. What do? You don't walk home empty. You reach for the lump, you chew it soft again, and you re-glue the point right there on the spot. That black nugget wasn't only a tool, it was a repair kit you carried inside your mouth. And the same glue sealed the seams of bark containers and patched what leaked, so it kept you fed and it kept you dry. Now, here's a detail that makes these people suddenly almost unbearably real. Some of the teeth marks in that ancient gum are tiny. At one site, the chewers were children, as young as 5, as old as 11. Picture that for a second. A 5-year-old, sitting in among the adults, handed a lump of tar to chew soft while the grown-ups build the weapons. Small hands and small teeth, learning the family trade with their jaws, the way you'd hand a kid a screwdriver and let them think they're helping. And once that gum was in their mouths, it turned out to do far more than melt. Birch bark is loaded with a compound called betulin, and betulin kills bacteria. So chewing that warm lump quietly scrubbed the mouth and calmed the gums every single time, without anyone knowing why it worked. Think about what that meant. If you had a rotting, throbbing tooth, and the nearest dentist was 10,000 years in the future, then a warm, faintly numbing, bacteria-killing lump to bite down on was the closest thing to relief you'd ever get in your entire life. It was a painkiller. It was a toothbrush. And out on a 2-day hunt, tracking a bleeding animal with nothing in your stomach, that same lump gave your mouth something to do while your body slowly ate itself. It took the worst edge off the hunger. So count up what this one black lump actually was. Glue for the weapon, a repair kit for the field, a seal for your water, medicine for your mouth, a break on your hunger. All of it cooked out of a strip of tree bark. Now, some of you are thinking, fine, but maybe they just liked chewing, and all the survival stuff is a happy accident. Fair. And the answer is simple. The tar shows up glued to weapons at site after site across 200,000 years and half a continent. That isn't an accident. That's a technology, and they were far better at making it than we ever gave them credit for. At a place in Germany called Königsau, Neanderthals didn't just burn bark in the open and scrape up whatever was left. They cooked their tar in a sealed, airless space, carefully controlling the heat. A genuine chemical process, run tens of thousands of years before anyone wrote a word or planted a seed. For a long time, people assumed a brain like that simply couldn't plan that far ahead. That assumption turned out to be wrong, very wrong, and the stakes could not have been higher. A spear that falls apart on impact gets you killed. A joint that melts in the rain leaves you standing defenseless in front of something with claws. Birch pitch didn't fail in the wet, and it didn't rot, and it held, which means the chewed black lump was never a footnote to survival. It was load-bearing. It was the one thing standing between a hungry family and the animal that could either feed them or finish them. Now, watch that same black lump do something none of the people chewing it could ever have dreamed of. Go to the west coast of Sweden, to a place called Huseby Klev. Around 10,000 years ago, a small group of teenagers sat there chewing wads of birch pitch and spitting them into the mud, the way you might flick a gum wrapper off a pier without a second thought. Those wads sank, and they stayed. And in 2019, when scientists finally lifted them out, the dried spit trapped inside was still carrying the chewers' DNA, whole human genomes, pulled out of gum. They could tell you what those teenagers had been eating. They could read the bacteria in their mouths and pick out the oldest signature of gum disease ever found, 10,000 years old. A piece of litter had quietly, perfectly recorded a living person. But the most astonishing one of all is a girl. Go back to a swamp in southern Denmark, to a site called Syltholm, 5,700 years ago. A young woman chews a small black lump of birch pitch, spits it into the mud at the edge of a lagoon, and walks away. And that is the very last trace of her. There's no skeleton, there's no body. There are no bones anywhere on Earth. There is only the gum. And in 2019, a team at the University of Copenhagen, led by a scientist named Hannah Schroeder, took that single chewed lump and rebuilt her from it. Not a sketch, her entire genome. They know she had dark skin, dark brown hair, and striking blue eyes. They found the DNA of hazelnuts and duck still sealed inside the tar, the last meal she ate before she chewed. They even found the fingerprint of a virus that was living in her body on the day she spat it out. The researchers gave her a name, Lola, and she is now one of the most completely known ancient humans on the entire planet. And it's all because she couldn't be bothered to hold on to a piece of gum. And she isn't alone. In Finland, at a place called Kirikki, archaeologists found another chewed lump, around 5,000 years old, with the bite marks of the person who worked it still pressed clean into the surface. All across the ancient north, people were chewing this stuff and dropping it, and every discarded piece turns out to be a sealed envelope with a whole human being folded up inside. And stop and feel how strange that is. Not a tomb, not a monument, not a painting deep in a cave. The richest, most personal record we have of some of these people is their garbage, the gum they couldn't be bothered to keep. Right now, you are more likely to be remembered 10,000 years from now by something you spat out without thinking than by anything you ever carefully built. And here's the twist that ties the whole thing together. The reason we can do any of this, the reason her spit survived for nearly 6,000 years, is the exact same reason the gum was so useful in the first place. Birch pitch is waterproof. It's mildly antiseptic. It refuses to rot. The very properties that made it good glue and good for an aching tooth are the properties that seal DNA inside it and guard it across the millennia. The thing that held their weapons together also held their story together. Glue for the weapon, medicine for the wound, and a diary that nobody ever meant to keep, which brings it all the way back to you and the gum you threw out today. You chewed yours out of pure habit, for a clean feeling mouth, for something to do with your jaw in a meeting you didn't want to be in. That's the luxury edition. But strip off the sugar and the mint and the factory that wrapped it, and what's left is almost unbelievably old. You are doing the exact same thing a Neanderthal did beside a fire 200,000 years ago, softening the glue that would feed his family. The same thing a 5-year-old did, learning to build a spear with her teeth. The same thing a girl in a Danish marsh did, minutes before she stood up, walked off, and made herself immortal completely by accident. They didn't chew to kill time. They chewed to buy it. One more day of eating, one more day of healing, one more day alive. You kept the habit. You just lost the reason. So the next time you catch your jaw jaw moving on a piece of gum with nothing in your head at all, stop for 1 second and feel what it's really doing. It's the oldest workshop on Earth. And 200,000 years ago, in the cold and the dark, hungry and frightened and stubbornly, brilliantly alive, someone was already there ahead of you, chewing a lump of black tar into a weapon, so that one day, safe and full and a little bit bored, you could chew a strip of mint into nothing at all.